Good evening, everyone. Wonderful, wonderful. Again, I'm Reverend Dr. Kirsten Boswell, University Chaplain and Dean of Multi-Faith Engagement, and it is truly wonderful to see all of you here tonight as we gather for this special time of community, of conversation, and of connection. As you've been sharing the meal, and hopefully all of the meals that you've shared today and will do so tomorrow, I hope that you're reminded that the act of breaking bread is more than just nourishment. It's a symbol of hospitality, of relationship building, and the power of gathering even across differences. In many of our faith traditions, gathering for a meal, breaking bread together, represents peace and fellowship and the opportunity to deepen understanding. And so that really makes this dinner together the perfect reflection of our theme, the art of interfaith. So as we finish up our dinner, we'll move into the plenary panel where we'll explore how faith, creativity, and community intersect in complex and beautiful ways. And we're honored to be joined by three incredible panelists whose work exemplifies the power of interfaith engagement. I will not be introducing them because we have two of our wonderful leaders who will be, but that introduction will be coming in just a moment. So together, our panelists will lead us in a conversation that really will challenge us to think about how we engage with the world around us, not just within our own traditions, but in the shared spaces where our beliefs, where our values, and where our stories meet. So as we continue to enjoy this meal, I invite you to engage not just with the food on your plate, but with the people around your table and with the words that our panelists are going to bring to us. Thank you for being part of this journey and for bringing your voice to the conversation and for embodying the spirit of interfaith connection. So continue to enjoy your meal, enjoy the panel, and we look forward to continuing with our thoughtful dialogue. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. How are we enjoying the conference so far? Yeah? I know everyone here has put in so much work, and I'm already so proud of everyone, so it's been so much fun. So my name is Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I am a multi-faith intern here at the Truett Center, which brings me to Ripple. I am double majoring in communications and acting here at Elon, and Zach and I are the co-leaders of tonight's panel. We've prepared some questions together that will emphasize the incredible insights that each of our guests have on this year's panel topic.
Hi all, I'm Zach Whiteson. I use he, they pronouns. I am a middle grades and special education major here and a psych minor. And speaking of tonight's panel topic, we're so excited to re-announce that the theme for the panel this year is the art of creative connections. Inspired by the conference theme being the art of interfaith this year, Sarah and I worked together to create a panel designed to dive deeper into the ways in which art and interfaith are not only connected to each other, but also the ways in which they connect us.
So as we brainstorm the themes of this panel, keeping in mind the conference theme being the art of interfaith, the idea of the concept of connection, especially connection as a result of creativity, continued to stand out to us. We know that through wisdom and shared stories, we will all gain incredible insight into the way that art and creativity can be valuable tools to connect with other people. Art is a form of expression unlike any other, and the power it has to bridge gaps among different religious, spiritual, and cultural backgrounds is something that we are interested in having our panelists discuss this evening.
So I'm going to start by introducing one of our panelists. I have the honor to introduce our first panelist, who is Hannah Podhorzer. She is an Elon alum from the class of 2019, and she is no stranger to the Ripple Conference. During her time at Elon, she served as a multi-faith engagement intern and creative director for the Ripple Conference. Today, she works in communications for the mental health care field while remaining engaged in artistic interfaith. We're so proud to have you back and to be part of this panel.
Give it up for Hannah. So our next panelist is Josue Vega, who's been raised here in the United States and has a rich Puerto Rican heritage. When he was a teenager, he embraced Islam, and his fascination with the artistic expression he found through Arabic calligraphy has grown into his own personal art form, which one of you got to experience today in a wonderful workshop. Let's hear it for the workshop if you were there. I heard it was awesome. Yeah. And this art form has helped to shape his spiritual messages and influence his daily life.
Our last panelist this evening is Roman Williams. Roman Williams is a sociologist, photographer, and the founder of Interfaith Photo Voice, a social enterprise that combines photography and sociology to foster interfaith understanding. During the pandemic, he had the opportunity to step out of higher education and into his own consulting practice focused on that belief. On the belief of belonging and human flourishing through arts-based participatory action approaches to community change. And we have one more note to add. We are so happy to have Roman here this weekend, especially since tonight is his birthday. So from all of us here in the room tonight, we wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you for being with us. All right, let's yes, ready? To you, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Roman. Happy birthday to you.
All right. All right. Well, we're going to get started now. And the first question we have for our wonderful panelists is, tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you are excited to be on a panel about the art of interfaith. Whoever wants to go first is free to go. You can go down the line. You can popcorn.
Thank you for that, friends. So sweet of you. I think, poor Zach, that was a mouthful. I'm trying to and it's hard for me to figure myself out sometimes. So my background is as an academic. I'm trained as a sociologist, and within sociology, there's this little pack of unicorns that use visual methodologies. Basically what that means is we're not using numbers as much, we're not using interviewing, ethnography as much, but we're starting with images. And that's how I kind of got into this work. I was puzzling together with a friend back in 2017. It was the first Friday of 2017, and my friend Michael, who has a broad, deep, beautiful background in interfaith work, he's a minister in New York City. He and I were having lunch, and he knew my background, I knew his. And we were both expressing these kinds of concerns about what was said about people with brown skin from other countries who happen to be Muslim by the incoming president. And I really wish there was a napkin where we mapped out a plan and could put it in a frame and put it up on the wall. But by the end of that lunch, we had this idea of taking his background and my background and doing this little thing. What we were really puzzling over was, what could a minister and a sociologist do in this moment? And I kind of want that to be a question for you as well. I know there are a lot of people in the room, I've heard people express similar kinds of concerns this round of the same president. And I want to invite you, you might think, hey, who am I? I'm a second year whatever major. What could I possibly do? Trust me, there is something inside of you that you can do. And that's part of what makes me excited about even framing interfaith around art. It invites a different part of us in terms of the arts and that side of our brain, but interfaith also is an art in and of itself. It's a practice. It's something you get better at over time. It's something that invites you to take this small step forward. And for me, that was this conversation with a friend, trying to figure out what we could do, what's our little part. And I think that everybody in the room has their own little part in being the agents of change, of repainting what the world looks like.
Good night, everybody. So a little bit about myself. I would say I'm a bit of everything, like in terms of arts and visuals. I've been interested in arts from a very early age, and then started to explore how, in my teenage years, how arts can be spiritual, because I didn't know that it could. And, just like that, I started to really make some connections, and it made a profound change. I had a big shift in my life, like I said, at an early age, and I know that a lot of you may have gone through something very similar. And so, for me, I'm excited about this conference because it gives me a chance. I had conversations with various people here, and it just gives me a chance to see what type of experiences you guys have had. Whether they were with visual arts or with something else, but it does speak to how, human beings, they have profound stories, and we don't always have a life that's linear. We always tend to change depending on the situation or even what's in the heart. So yeah, I guess you could say my whatever I'm doing in terms of visual arts and design is based on that. So, like, even my design work, I try to merge classical Islamic arts with modern graphic design. And what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to bridge these beautiful sacred arts to the modern world, I guess you could say, so people can have some exposure to them. So that's a little bit about what I do. Thank you.
Evening. I think this is on. Okay, great. I am really excited to be on this panel as well, and love what the both of you have shared. For me, art has always been a part of my life growing up, and I feel grateful that interfaith was also a part of my life growing up. And in some ways, the two sort of merged in one of, I think, probably my entryway to interfaith was my mom was part of I think it was called the Atlanta Interfaith Jewish Muslim Women's Baking Group. And that started in the early 2000s in the Atlanta area. That was a collaboration, a partnership between a mosque and our synagogue. And thinking about culinary arts too, it's amazing that was maybe kind of the birthplace of a lot of their interfaith connections. And I think what I'm excited about with this panel and with this topic is that I think art is one of the most vulnerable things that we do. As humans, it invites such a sense of openness in the same way that interfaith does as well, right? Like, we've spent the weekend so far maybe literally or metaphorically taking off our shoes and entering into different spaces with different people. And I think both of those sort of concepts invite us to ask some of those same questions, be candid, be introspective. So I'm really excited about this panel and what you all have put together.
So our first real question is, what was your first experience with art that was truly impactful in your life? And what was that piece of art, and how did it impact you personally or spiritually?
The first piece that I thought of with this question is a poem, and it's called The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And it's a poem that I was introduced to at age 10 at summer camp, interestingly enough. And it is a poem that is many different stanzas that all start the same way. Every stanza starts with, "It doesn't interest me, ... And it kind of follows some of those classic questions you hear, it doesn't interest me what you do for a living, ... I want to know. And that's how every single stanza goes. And so I believe that one might be, I want to know what sustains you when all else falls away, for example. And it's such a wonderful poem that actually introduces a whole book called The Invitation. And each stanza is sort of an invitation to these different questions. And I think as a child, I don't think I fully comprehended some of the stanzas for sure. But what I really appreciate about the poem, and that I've come back to now 17, 18 years later, is that different stanzas for it sort of resonate with different chapters and times in my life. And so the question that resonated to me at 1 year or one moment is now different with a different stanza that I might pull up from the poem and say, oh, this really resonates with what I'm experiencing at this moment, or questions that I'm asking. So that was the piece that came to mind that has definitely impacted me personally and spiritually, and also been something that I've been able to share with other people, which is also another piece of art and connection as well.
Okay, so I might get a little personal with this one. Just take it back. When I was a teenager, I was having a conversation with Roman about this. When I was, and I just realized what piece actually had got me going. But so when I was a teenager, that drastic shift that I told you about, I became almost, I embraced the faith of Islam. And my parents had no idea that I've done that. And I was trying to keep it a secret because I didn't think they would understand my decision at that time. And so every time it was, time for prayer, I would lock the door so no one would get inside the room. I was afraid that they just wouldn't understand what I was doing. But one day I got into the prayer and I forgot to lock the door. So my mother, she's calling me from across the house, and she's like, Josue, she's calling me. And I'm nervous, because I'm like, oh, she's gonna walk in while I'm praying. So she ended up opening the door, and she saw me in the prayer, and she's thinking I'm crazy, because she's never seen anything like it before. And since then, she was even waving her hand. She thought I was in some trance. But then after I was done, she had a conversation with my father, and they just thought I was crazy. And it was a big conflict in the house. So I remember thinking to myself, there's just no way for me to communicate. I have no words. There's just anything I say is just not gonna bridge anything. So I had no words. But I do remember seeing a beautiful piece. It was a calligraphy in the shape of like a stork. And it said Bismillah Rahman Rahim on it. It's like and I remember seeing, I was like, wow, this is so beautiful, So I would take that image and I went and traced it. And I put that piece of calligraphy on my dresser. And I didn't realize at the time why I did that, but I realize now that the reason that I put that piece there was really I was trying to communicate something to my parents. I was trying to let them know that there is beauty and maybe something they don't understand. So I guess you can say that was my first piece that I've, that had deep impact on me. So.
I remember as a kid being fascinated by photography. My dad had one of these cameras, so, okay, you already know it's my birthday, so cat's out of the bag. I'm 54, so just kind of to figure out where I fit on the timeline. So back in the day when, we were using rolls of film, but my dad had this thing called an Instamatic, which was like the precursor to the Polaroid that, Hannah was playing around with this afternoon, and some of you were in her amazing workshop. And I was always fascinated by that process. You would take the picture and magically show up on that, and you kind of there was this whole thing you had to do. Once, those of you that grew up with one of these, like there's the waving and waiting, right? Yep, there it is. When I got to college is really when I fell in love with photography, and it happened in a sort of an unexpected, funny way. I got to campus and found that I had a crush on the school photographer. And I thought, what could I do to hang out with this person? So I went out and got a fancy camera. And it never really sparked romantically, but we became friends. And they showed me how to process film in a dark room, and to really see that process that I was fascinated with as a kid that my dad and his Instamatic was producing. And there was something magical. It wasn't just the processing of it, it is somehow this thing. I mean, I kind of wonder what it would have been like to be Daguerre, who was widely credited as the person that started this whole process back in 1839 of affixing an image to a plate of metal and letting us do what we do today. And now look at these. It's incredible that you're walking around with a camera that has an integrated telephone. It's amazing. Right? And you're using it on a daily basis, and figuring out how to use it for good, I think really has become part of my life's purpose.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that input. I feel goosebumps from all three of those, really. So our next question for you guys is, what do you see as the purpose of art in society, as well as the purpose of art in your own life?
All right. Yeah, so, sorry, sometimes I'm just thinking about this because art is so dynamic, I see the purpose of art as just, like I was saying before, when words fail, you can connect through imagery. So people have their own interpretations of how life is and, how we're ought to operate on this planet. But I really do believe that art can really bridge the gap between people, because it allows you to see the beauty in things. And so I think that would be the function, and it's been the function for me. Even though when I was telling you that story earlier about my parents freaking out, I can say now that they are actually really, really, they have a high regard for Islam and for, and just open-minded in general. And I think a part of it is just really them being able to see something different that they weren't exposed to. Usually when we see things, it's usually like something negative, but that now they're able to see something and they can connect to it and say, wow, this actually looks beautiful. What is it like? So I would say that's, the purpose.
There's so many ways to answer these questions. My mind's going in multiple directions. I guess one of the things I'll say is that I think art helps us to see in multiple ways. It helps us to look backward at what was. It helps us to look around at what's going on. It helps us to look forward. It helps us look inside. It's like this portal where we can make discoveries and be challenged. I think, though, the thing that really comes to mind with this question is it comes from the work of Dorothy Lang. Dorothy Lang was one of the photographers during the Great Depression that went out in America and sort of documented life. And probably the most famous photograph that she made is called Migrant Mother. You probably have seen it. It's this mom, and she's destitute, and she's holding a couple of kids. And later in life, Dorothy Lang was interviewed by her biographer, and she said the most curious thing, that the camera is an instrument for learning to see without a camera. The camera is an instrument that teaches us how to see without a camera. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just take for granted the phone, the camera that I'm carrying around with me all the time, and I'm always thinking about the way that it's shaping my own internal world. And I think that's probably true for most people. And I find myself falling into the trap of making my pictures follow some kind of convention that is made up by the world. I bet you do too. Especially those of you that are in the younger end of the age spectrum that grew up with these ideas about what someone's supposed to look like on Instagram or on Snapchat or other places. And the world has sort of taught us how we're supposed to see. And for me, art provides a pathway for unlearning that. It's a social constructed reality. This is a sociologist, Roman, now, that, we live in this world that we inherit. Beauty, the notion of beauty didn't fall out of the sky entirely. It's something that we've constructed, just like lipstick doesn't fall out of the sky or grow on trees. It's something we've created. It's these ideas that we impose on what the world should be like. And they show up in our pictures. And I find Dorothy Lang's words as an important reminder of a deeply important religious, spiritual, worldview, values reminder that we need to pay attention, careful attention to the ways in which we interact with everyday objects like our cameras, because they're shaping us in profound ways.
Yeah, I think that there's so many facets to this question. And one of the things that came up for me is I think this idea that for me, art really projects to us the value of life and also the value of our response to it as well. When I was a student at Elon, I had the opportunity to take this great class about contemporary art. And I didn't really know a lot about that, hadn't really learned a lot about that in high school. And some of our projects were to go to different museums around Elon's campus and discuss the different contemporary art exhibits. And so I did this first engagement essay, I turned in my assignment, and I basically just regurgitated what the museum piece next to the art said, thinking it was a great thing. And I didn't do so hot on the paper. And one of the things that professor said, probably indirectly, was, I care about what this art historian has to say or what this exhibit has to say, but I really care about what you have to say. And what I learned through that class was the value that, the three of us, for example, could all interact with the same piece of art and have three completely different responses, reactions, ideas about it because of our own backgrounds and experiences. And the same goes for every person in this room. And I think that class, for example, demonstrated to me that there was just as much value in what I had to say as someone else who had been an art historian for 3 decades, or any other person that was walking through that gallery space. And so I think the art making process and even art as a product can so resourcefully demonstrate the human experience in a plethora of ways, but also projects to us the value of our own voice and our own response in engaging with that art too.
I love that perspective. Thank you guys so much. So now we would like to know what piece of art or artist most resonates with you, you'll never forget, you'll always come back to, or that feels like home. And how does that art help you find meaning in your everyday life? And this art can be from any place or time.
So I would say, I can't say that it was one particular piece of art for me, but there is an artist that I do go back to and look at his pieces all the time. His name is Mohammed Zakaria. He's a American calligrapher, Arabic calligrapher, Islamic calligrapher, residing in Washington, D.C. But I was absolutely inspired by his work. Not only does he do calligraphy, but he's a craftsman, so he creates old pieces from the past. He created like astrolabes and sundials made out of brass with inscriptions that resemble that of the past. And those things had really been it has a profound impact on me. And I think the reason why is because when I first laid eyes on his work, I remember thinking to myself, wow, like how could someone's hand be so steady? And how does one just effortlessly make letters or patterns without measuring? They do it and it's from their mind. If you hear of geniuses who can calculate with numbers, but what about those who can calculate with visuals? Sometimes I think about even just the color wheel being like a visual calculator. People can actually understand it and read it, and I think that it's overlooked. But I've learned to really appreciate how well he does it, and I want to know how does one get to there. So I've heard of this. There's a beautiful saying in Islam, and it's sorry, I want to paraphrase it because I'm not sure if it's word for word, but do things as if God sees you, and if you can't do that, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, I got the thing wrong, but it's more or less do things if. Oh my goodness, I got this wrong. Sorry. But basically, it's if you can't get to a certain level, then realize He sees you. More or less the minute. I'm so sorry. But so that's basically what it was. So I'm gonna cut it there so I don't keep looking like.
In the summer of 1992, when we were still riding around on dinosaurs, I had the opportunity to go to Russia on a trip with like a study tour. And one of our stops was in St. Petersburg. And we went into the Hermitage, which is this big, amazing old palace, and it's chock full of amazing artwork. And I remember seeing one of Rembrandt's originals in there called The Return of the Prodigal Son. And the prodigal son is a parable that Jesus told of this young person who basically took their inheritance, ran off, wasted it on wild living, came to their senses and came back to their father with hat in hand and said, I've sinned against you, Dad, I've wasted your money, I'm a worthless person. I'd be happy just to be a servant in your household. And the father has this amazing, amazing response of embracing him and saying, no, we're gonna party now that what this lost son of mine is home. And there've been a lot of attempts to paint this particular moment of the prodigal son returning. And I think Rembrandt's depiction is just amazing. I encourage you, I mean, maybe even if you want to now, I won't be offended if you have your phones out and you're looking it up. It is a really beautiful rendering. And about that same time, Henri Nouwen came out with his book on this painting. And I worked through that book, and I'm not going to give any of it away, because if you were at all inclined toward art and reflection and faith, particularly if you're a Christian, because coming from a Christian tradition, but I think there's stuff in there for everybody. So worked through that book, read it, it really impacted my faith. I mean, what's really interesting about that painting is that, you know, the light in the painting is hitting the back, so it's the son on his knees, and you're looking at the son's back, and the father is embracing him, reaching hands over his shoulders, and the older brother, who is kind of pissed, he's like, here's this jerk younger brother of mine that ran off with a family fortune and wasted it. And there's these couple of other characters that are visible, but if you look closely, there's this person in the top left corner that you can barely make out. And the book kind of walks you through these different perspectives, and imagining yourself in that painting from those different perspectives was transformative. And then later, a few years later, I had the opportunity to go back to St. Petersburg in Russia and go back into the Hermitage and see that again. And having walked through that experience of reading the book, it's really stayed with me. And I think, you know, I haven't paid enough attention to that piece lately. And now that I have kids that are, my youngest is finishing high school this year. And so I think I would have a new perspective, and this question is inviting me to return to that piece. And I in my mind's eye, I can see where the book is on my bookshelf at home. And I'm going to thank you for reminding me of this through your question.
When I first heard this question, my mind went back to that poem that I was sharing earlier, because it really does feel like coming home whenever I open that poem. And I also did want to think of something else as well, which is very connected, which is another poet, Mary Oliver, who I have enjoyed for many years. For those of you that were at our breakout session this afternoon, we had some of her poetry, and I said, oh, we have a wide diversity of poets. It was 80% Mary Oliver, for sure. But one of my favorite poems by her is called The Pawns, and it's a longer poem, but I just thought I'd read the last remaining stanzas because they're my favorites, and I think what I continue to come back to. And she has a lot of her poetry takes place in the natural world, or uses a lot of symbols and elements from the natural world, and a pond is certainly one of those in addition to animals. So these are the last three stanzas of The Pawns. She says, "Still what I want in my life is to be willing to be dazzled, to cast aside the weight of facts, and maybe even to float a little above this difficult world. I want to believe I am looking into the white fire of a great mystery. I want to believe that the imperfections are nothing, that the light is everything, that it is more than the sum of each flawed blossom rising and fading, and I do." So that's my favorite.
Wow. I'm blown away by everything you guys just shared with us. These are such amazing pieces and such touching memories that you guys have with these pieces. We now want to give some time to the audience members to connect with your art as well. So, as you guys may have seen when you walked in, we have some art by our fabulous panelists displayed around the room in a gallery. We would like for you guys to spend some time connecting with these pieces, as well as the Post-it notes with a question on each of them. It is sectioned, so I'm going to try my best right now to describe the sections for you, and Sarah will go around. So our first section is from that Post-it note over there to the tea jug. Yes, I will use some good markers. Then we have from the water jug all the way over to the Purell dispenser. Those are our two sections on this side. On this side of the room, from the end of the rock table, thank you, Ryan. From the end of the table all the way to the chair is our third section. And then our final section, our biggest section, is by Rabbi Maurer. So, we invite you to spend some time looking at and connecting with each of these pieces and answering the questions. We do not expect you to get to all 4 quadrants of the room. Please spend some time really engaging with the art and the questions provided. You have like 10 to 15 minutes to engage with the amazing art that has been provided by our panelists. And there are markers there are 4 chairs by one of the posters. You can use those, or if you have a pen, pencil, writing utensil of your own, you are free to use that as well. You may begin when you feel free to do so.
So I'm just gonna tell you guys this as soon as possible so you can start thinking, but we have time for maybe 1 or 2 audience questions. So start thinking right now. And we have Morgan and Ryan, or Zach will come around with a microphone. Zach. So yeah, raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. The chosen one.
Oh, okay. I don't really know how to phrase this question, so excuse me if I sound crazy, but I guess you guys have made art kind of like it's clearly a passion for you all, and you clearly love it very much. But I guess, did you ever like have a fear, maybe like a few like in the past, of like, how can I actually, like, will this be able to, sustain me, financially? Am I going to be able to do this forever? Am I going to get tired of this? I hear burnout is pretty common in artist industries, so I just wondered if you guys ever thought about that.
Scares me to death. No, it's good. So, I mean, I was a tenured professor in university, and I was addicted to this thing called a bi-monthly paycheck. It's true. And I have these friends that are these fancy consultant type people, and I always thought, wow, maybe that's what I want to do when I grow up. Like, if there's another takeaway, don't grow up. So, probably about, 10 years ago or so, I took this class from my friend's consulting agency and learned all the stuff you're supposed to know to be like set up a business and like how much do you charge for an hour and all this sort of stuff, and thought, when my kids get through college, I think I'm going to give this a try. Because the other secret is that faculty and staff at a university, their kids don't usually have to pay, or at least don't pay full price. It's a huge benefit. So I was happy as a clam in my office during the 2019-2020 year, I was on sabbatical. And I was meant to be working on a book. And you all know what happened in the spring of 2020. Everything goes crazy. Well, my university, the bottom falls out of it financially. And I got let go. Even though I had tenure, it's kind of unheard of, but the financial situation was so bad. I like to joke that the two best things in my academic career happened at that university. The second best was them hiring me. And the first best was letting me go. Because then I looked at this thing called a severance package, like 6 months of wages and benefits and all that stuff, and said, if I would have left higher ed under my own accord, they would never have handed me 6 months on-ramp. And starting a business during the summer of 2020 wasn't exactly the thing that I had learned to do in that little class at my friend's fancy, course on consulting. And there are ups and downs. There are nights when I wake up in the middle of the night and say, okay, where is the next project or whatever coming from? And there are months where I have to live off of my home equity line of credit, and so that I can make sure that my couple of people that work for me get paid. And yeah, it is a reality that making choices like this, there are risks. But I can't imagine finding this much fulfillment in anything else at this point in my life. I feel like I'm doing well. I also like to say that I'm helping to make the world a better place, one photo at a time. And the photos that you saw around here, you can see they're not my photos. I just help people turn their daily experiences into a kind of amateur art that they can use to engage the world. But if you haven't seen Lex's picture back here in the corner of this screen of their phone, I'd say that's probably one of the most powerful and profound photos that someone's produced in one of our projects. It's powerful and it's transformative. And when I see that happen, not only in someone like Lex, but in her peers and in her school, it makes those sleepless nights dissipate in the weight that I feel like I'm carrying.
That's a great question. And I feel that there's sort of this scarcity mindset, I think, that we can have around art, both financially and in other ways too. And I think speaking to that financial piece and, how could this be my livelihood? I remember asking some of those questions myself, and I think even some of my interest to study graphic design at Elon felt like a way maybe to do that, because I had seen people who had careers as graphic designers and things like that more so than some of the other forms of art, which I think is interesting, because I wish in some ways I had more exposure to more types of careers of art. But I remember as I was graduating, we were working on portfolios and getting advice as seniors, and then after I graduated, I had a job, and I had it for like two and a half months, and the funding ran out. And thought, okay, I really have to think about what I want to do next, where I might want to live, all of these big questions. And I was grateful that I had this sort of design piece that I felt like, okay, I could maybe, if someone in my community needs a logo, I can, do something like that. But I found myself getting a lot of mixed advice. People told me to make stuff for free. People told me to charge this. There were all these kind of mixed messages that I was getting. And I think especially as a young person and as a young woman, I thought, how could I charge for this? I don't have the experience. Like, there were all these questions, this sort of like scarcity mindset idea of like, who am I to be, charging this with the experience or lack of experience that I have, which I think I want to connect to this other idea of, I think, scarcity more broadly in art, because I remember when I was in high school, I had a photography portfolio that I was submitting, and I mailed it away, and I thought, this is the end of the era. I'm never gonna make anything like this again. And then I was in college, and I was in different classes, and college gave birth to some of the pieces that are here. And I thought, gosh, I'm never gonna be in this environment. My best work is behind me. This was this idea that I had, and that has continued. And I imagine that maybe other folks who, are creative in different ways might resonate with this idea of sort of, what if my best work is behind me, or what if it's not good enough? What if it's not going to be picked up by the world in the way that I want it to? And I think as children, we so unabashedly create. We're like, oh, we have a need. I'm gonna draw, I'm gonna paint, and as we get older, at least for me as an adult, I began to think, why does my voice matter? There's so many other people, things feel so saturated. What is the place for me to be saying or doing something? But I feel like this conference is proof that it does all matter, and that it is picked up time and time again by other people, even in ways that we maybe can't see when we're envisioning it or creating it. And so I encourage, I think, myself to try and shift away from, is the work going to be good enough? Am I good enough? Because I know those aren't really going to be sustaining questions for me, but instead, can I operate from more of a space of abundance and creativity and excitement about the ideas that I haven't even thought of yet, and that we all haven't even thought of yet either.
I think my answer might be a little bit shorter. And the only reason I say that is because, I'll be honest, I've had trouble trying to link making paintings and then connecting it with financials. And the reason why I say that is because anytime I try to make something so that I can get paid for it, I get stuck. I get stuck because, I want to make it perfect, or I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing. So what I try to do instead is I just shift my intention. So my intention there would be create a piece that someone can, it can uplift their soul or something like that. Or perhaps if I do get some monetary gains, perhaps I can help someone with it or something like that. So that it's not just art that I make for money for myself, but something is given back with it as well. So I would say that, yeah, I do have troubles. I know that you can certainly make money as an artist. There's so many people that I've seen on Instagram and social media do it, and as well as some other artists. But for me personally, I just can imagine myself when I'm 80 years old and still doing it, not necessarily for money, but maybe I could give a piece of beauty back to the world. So that's what I would say.
And thank you all for your answers. We are at our last question of the evening, so before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here. I think we've all really enjoyed your insights, and this has been a lovely discussion. So to wrap everything up, we want to know, have you encountered a piece of art, and you can use your own art as an example, that you believe translated really well across faith and culture? And can you describe this experience and this piece of art and why you think that it was universally resonant?
But I'm not going to start the answer, but I am going to say that we've had these questions for a couple days, and I think this is the one that stumps me the most. I think for me, there was a moment I was traveling with my kids, and we were in Spain, and we're making that trip from Madrid south towards Sevilla, and we stopped in Cordoba. And we went to the Mezquita. The Mezquita is this mosque, church that has sort of gone back and forth between different houses of worship over time. And there's this amazing beauty to the architecture and the way that each of those traditions express themselves and the way those traditions meld together into one is just a really amazing thing. And I think that that's in a lot of ways, that to me, that's what religion and spirituality look like. Pick whatever it is, pick Christianity, pick Islam. One of those we could think of as our human experience. And the other piece could be that experience of the sacred. And it's that constant building together of those worlds in ways that make the world a beautiful place, a place where people can experience the sacred, that can experience Allah, experience God in this example. So I think that would be, and it's interesting that it wasn't trying to be translatable necessarily. They were trying to carve out a space that was authentic. And I think that authenticity, in some ways, is what makes it resonate so deeply with me.
You guys can also answer the other one if you'd rather, and I can tell the audience that one. Would you prefer the last question?
How does your art convey?
Yeah, how does your art convey a message that no other form of communication could? You can answer that one or the one that I previously asked.
I just want to get.
Okay.
I was thinking about getting to that first one, actually. It just goes back to the story that I told you from the beginning, that stork or the bird that says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim means in the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful. Usually when Muslims start something, they start it off by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim when we eat or when we start a piece of art or anything. And it's just basically acknowledging that, it's kind of redirecting our intention. And so, yeah, I would say that particular piece had a profound impact on me. And I think that it translates well across because, I think everything is done through intention, Everything that we do is done through an intention, so. I thought we lost him. Done on purpose. No. I'm kidding. So I think that that's the reason why. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to go back to that quote to kind of get some redemption. All right, because that was a big fumble. So the quote was, "Worship God as though you see Him, and if you can't, realize He sees you." Okay, so that was the quote. Sorry, I had completely missed it. Yeah, and so and just really quick, I'm not going to take too much longer with this one, but the reason why that was important was because if you actually do anything in life, and you have that type of powerful belief that you are being watched, you're probably going to do it with the utmost care, craftsmanship, the best of intentions. And so that was the reason why I had quoted that. So.
I might take a stab at the second question. I think in terms of art conveying messages, my art, at least the visual art that I like to make, it has a lot of layers to it. And I first kind of started experimenting with that style when at the end of high school, again, I was working on this photography portfolio and I had gone on a hike and I'd taken some different photos of nature and I overlaid two of them on, I guess it was on Photoshop. And it was amazing the ways in which this leaf and this body of water or this tree that were from totally disparate areas of this hike were able to meld together. It seemed like so seamlessly, almost as they were stitched originally as one picture. And I ended up kind of using that style for the rest of my portfolio. And since then have kind of thought about adding on drawing or text or kind of other layers. And I think for me, that art form, it really does elicit this notion of the interconnectedness. And that can be interconnectedness of all living things. That can be interconnectedness around humanity. And I think that the sort of texture that comes from that, or that overlay style, I'm not sure that I could express that in any other way other than in that visual depiction.